Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we're going to do a quick little disassembly and maintenance video of this guy here. This is the Spyderco Spydiechef Martin Sleesh design. Same guy who did the Sleesh buoy. So first off, it's a Spyderco, and so I got to warn you that even though it's a $200 knife, for whatever reason they've decided that disassembling the knife does void your warranty. So if you screw the knife up in this process, they're not going to be super helpful. They usually stand behind their products, but you do want to keep in mind that, well, don't follow me if you're faint of heart and not willing to void your warranty. This knife is pretty straightforward to take apart, though. This is not a dangerous, particularly way to go about it. It's actually a pretty nice knife, too. So I'm going to start off, and I'm just going to use a T6 driver to unscrew your standoff screws here. 1 and 2. One reason you might disassemble this knife is, listen to this. That right there is the lanyard tube rattling around inside the lanyard hole. This is something that I've actually heard a couple of times from a couple of different viewers who mentioned that with their particular knives, and so mine's got it as well, so that makes me just think that there's a slight difference in tolerances there. I'm surprisingly okay with it because you can always just take that lanyard tube out when you take the knife apart, or peen it open if you don't plan to ever take the knife apart, but I'd recommend against that. But either way, you know, I'd rather it be that way than, for instance, like on your on some of your other Spydercos, you end up with a lanyard tube that's way too thick. The PM2 often has this issue, and that just complicates life significantly. This knife has pretty tight tolerances, so actually popping the scales apart can be, shall we say, non-trivial. What I'm going to do here is just use this piece of stiff leather here to kind of apply some spreading pressure. There we go. And that's just a simple fact because all of these are flanged. And so it's very easy for the knife to kind of get trapped on there. Let's see here. This is your lanyard tube. You can take it out that way. One other thing to point out is that these screws here that hold in the clip don't actually connect, unlike on a lot of your Spydercos with the wire clip. So you don't actually need to take the clip off to disassemble the knife, which is one step even nicer than a lot of other knives. So let's go on ahead and jump into the clean out here. This is currently running on the red stuff is Nano Grease. Nano Grease is great stuff. It's a thickish lubricant, and you know I've used it a lot. I use it on the Sleesh buoy these days. It's pretty great actually. But I tried it on this guy and seemed to work fine. But I'm going to switch it back to a nano oil and see how that rolls. Perfect, there we go. So there is going to be a little bit more cleanup. Don't feel like this came from the factory in that way. This is not the first time I've been all up inside this knife. Usually, well, for me at least, the very first day I own a knife, I will often do a disassembly. Sometimes with a knife that's a little bit more complicated, or sometimes with a brand new knife, especially from Spyderco, I will not do that. I'll wait a little while. Or the other exception is if I see Teflon washes, because very often Teflon is extra fragile. And that makes me, on occasion, reluctant to do disassemblies. But that's life. Alrighty. So, cleaning this pivot off here. Just getting this grease off. It's a little ugly, the grease. But the nice thing about it is that it actually traps all the metal dust that takes, because every time you start breaking a knife in, you use a knife for a little while, a bunch of gunk at first starts to accumulate because, well, the parts are going to wear each other down a little bit, smooth each other out. On this knife, actually, one thing I will point out is that the scales is some kind of an acid wash to them, but they've actually used some kind of a sticker or something like that to keep the titanium nice and, I won't say polished, but nice and clean here. And sorry, heater just kicked on, hope that's not too loud. But anyways, they've used some sticker to keep that nice and polished so that you got no real problem there. But anyways, there's always somewhere, and so the first time you take a knife apart, especially if you flip it back and forth for a long time, you'll often have some gunk to get up in there and clean on out. Now finally, let's just go ahead and use a Q-tip here. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm using just rubbing alcohol like you would buy from your local drugstore to do this disassembly and cleaning. I used to use Simple Green, which is a great degreaser sort of chemical, but it turned out to be overkill. I stopped using it sometime back just on a lark, hey, let's try alcohol. And it's worked, the booze has worked just beautifully ever since. So I stopped. Problem solved. All right, so this knife is nice and clean. You could technically unscrew these standoffs here, but there's no reason to. They're titanium. This is titanium. You don't need to do rust protecting up behind them or anything. So, no problem. I don't see any need whatsoever here. The other thing to point out, and this is not a factory edge, by the way. I was playing with a KME sharpening system recently, and yeah. One other thing to point out, though, about this knife is that it is subject to some Blockstick. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite as bad as like the Nirvana, but it's got some Lockstick. And so, as a way to ameliorate that, I'm just going to use the Sharpie here. Just your boring Sharpie like you buy at your office supply store, your grocery store, whatever. And I'm just applying some to the lock face here, which helps to reduce it. And I'm also going to, to the lock bar face, and then I'm going to apply some to the lock face on the knife itself. One thing to point out while I'm in here, though, which is a nice little detail, is that there is actually, although it's now harder to see, but this side has a sharp corner here. This side actually has a secondary chamfer, and that just serves as a ramp for the detent ball to hop back onto the knife blade. That's kind of a beautiful thing. Just makes the knife shut a lot more easily. It's a little tiny detail, but those little tiny details tell me that Spyderco gave a damn in designing this knife, or that Martin Sleesh did, or I don't know where that came into the process, but whoever added it has my respect, because it's not necessarily something you immediately think about, but it is kind of a cool thing. So I always love seeing little details like that. What, me? Love details? No, never. So, it's reassembly time. We are good to go here in terms of cleanliness. What I'm going to go ahead and do is drop in my lanyard tube. Again, I may take this out in the future here, but I may also be sending this guy along. My buddy Bird over at the Birdshot IV channel has been lusting after this knife, and so I may send it along to him for his review. And I want him to get it in full form. He may be a lanyard guy. I don't think he's a lanyard guy. But either way. And you can use a lanyard without a lanyard tube. So what I just did is I applied some of your heavier weight nano oil to the pivot here. I'm going to try with the heavier weight nano oil. Am I? Yeah, I think I am. This is the 85 weight. You could get away just fine with the 10 weight, or you could grease this guy. No problem. Wow, that sounds really different in a knife context. Greasing this guy in American mobster parlance tends to mean you're going to kill him. In this case, I literally mean that you can apply grease to this little guy right here. I really hope desperately that the transcripts of all of my videos don't ever become searchable due to advances in automatic speech recognition. I feel like that would be very embarrassing. Between pocket peckers and the greasing guys, oy, that could be rough. Again, I'm applying some nano oil to the detent ball path here. That just helps the detent ball to smoothly roll along there. I've got some oil on the washer here. I'll go ahead and drop that on there. Now, the lockup on this guy is a little on the late side. That's, I don't know. I have a lot of trouble getting bent out of shape about late lockups, as long as it's not over the top completely 100% late. But as a result, that does mean that the lock bar plays a little bit more of a role in disassembling this knife than perhaps usually. Okay. So I'm popping in the back spaces first, and then to the pivot. And then I'm just going to lower the, I'm pressing down the lock bar here, and that just kind of compacts everything down. I'm going to drop the pivot screw in first. I'm going to use a little tiny bit of blue Loctite. Always the blue Loctite. Longtime viewers are saying, Nick, we know it's blue, but somebody might just be, this is their very first time taking apart a knife. They just buy Loctite, they buy red, and next thing you know, they're spending some quality time with a hairdryer on a knife they put back together. And that's just a sad state of affairs. Anyways, putting some blue Loctite on the scale screws here. And I'm going to go ahead and put these guys in just gently. I'm not fully tightening them down yet. Just want them in position. I tend to put in your scale screws, at least when I'm thinking about it. I tend to tighten those down after you pivot. On some knives, it does make a difference in terms of centering. I don't think this is one of them, but you know, what the heck. One of those might help things. There we go. Alrighty, so now, where am I at in pivot tension? This needs a little more love. So, go ahead and tighten my pivot down. And on this knife, what I'm going to do is tighten it all the way. Okay, that's a little too tight. So now I'm going to back it off slightly. There we go. How's this feeling? That's feeling pretty good. There's no blade play, so I'm kind of waggling the blade back and forth here just to make sure there's no play, because that's an important issue you want to avoid. Yeah, that feels pretty good. Can I loosen it up a little bit more? I don't think I actually can, but let's give it a shot here. I mean, you saw that. That was like an eighth of a turn. Nope, there's a little tiny bit of blade play. So I'm going to tighten it right back to where it was. There we go. No blade play. Don't also be terribly surprised if on a knife like this you get it all dialed in so there's no play. Use it for a couple of weeks and find that there's a little bit of play. Particularly if you didn't use Loctite, but even if you did. And I'm just checking, the centering here is pretty much perfect. But you want to make sure your centering is good, and feel free to kind of apply a little bit of pressure as you're tightening the screws to get the centering kind of locked in. Again, on a well-made knife, it's not generally a concern. But on some knives, oh man, is it a concern. There we go. So, oh yeah, beautiful. Action's good, smooth. Not quite Sleesh Bowie smooth yet, but I've owned the Bowie for a lot longer. And there we go. Perfect. I don't even know what I was saying, but hopefully it wasn't anything too interesting. It's been a long day, guys. Very long day. But on the bright side, I got to put together a knife that's just a joy to put together because it's easy and it's simple. And it's a great design. So, there we go. Keep an eye out for a review of this little guy coming up very, very quickly here. And hopefully this was interesting to you. And have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day and enjoy your Spidey Chef here. This really is a great knife. Well done, Spyderco. Bye now.